Welcome to Love and Live Abundantly. I'm Ilona.
I'm Bill. Do you want to love more effectively?
Do you want to live fully and love more courageously?
We talk about what all that means
and how you can achieve it. Join us.
Hello, everybody. We're back. Last time we were talking about a variety of topics that somehow had a similar and tied together kind of thread, including limerence and love and trauma and how we keep on making the same mistakes and so on. And we really, the time went so fast that it was clear that we needed to pick back up where we left off. Am I not correct?
No,
I'm sorry. This is my associate, Ilona, and I'm Bill Mock.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Yes, it was definitely an interesting conversation, and we felt worthy enough to bring into this episode as well. There were a lot of golden nuggets in our last podcast, and so we want to, break those down a little bit more where, people can understand and, what they can do to choose another choice.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about, how we get ourselves trapped into this kind of repetitive cycle of self-harm and beating ourselves up and chasing back out after a trauma that we said we never wanted to have again, but somehow keeps repeating itself. And we sort of touched on some of the stuff that folks do to make a difference, but it occurred to us at the end of the last one that we talk a lot about the hole we dig ourselves into, and maybe Ilona and I should talk a little bit about some of the specific kinds of things you can do to dig out.
Yes. Yeah, and uncover, I like to use the expression peeling the layers of an onion back, right? Like there's many, many different layers. And I feel like that could go back to, our childhood and the trauma we experienced during that time. It can be an experience with a teacher. I know that I had a teacher. I was in 6th grade and she was the cool teacher, and she asked us to bring in an item for Monday. Maybe we even had off on Monday. It was a long weekend, and she gave us the homework assignment on a Friday. I was 11 years old. To me, life was about playing. I just went to school because I had to. So as soon as I left school that day, I didn't even think about the homework assignment until that next school day. And I bought in a product and it was the wrong product. And she screamed at me. I wanted to go in the corner and die. Right. So just those kinds of things that can happen. Or, if you were never picked for kickball, right? Like those things can affect the choices that we make. And if we don't feel good about ourselves and confident, I feel like it's easier to go back to those belief systems or that programming, right, that we had when we were younger. I feel like as kids, we're just big sponges, right? And we soak up our environment, our parents, our teachers, society, and we take that on. And then when we become adults, all of those things affect who we are. And so, there are ways to start uncovering and releasing those things. I talk to people and they're like, I don't understand. My brain just does that. Like, even though I really want it, my brain's going to hold me back. And I'm like, absolutely. Because your brain's purpose, one of its purposes is to keep you safe.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And however, in that, it also holds us back. And so that I feel like that could be limerence in a good way and in a bad way. It really
Well,
just,
one of the things about limerence is that when it's working, it's exactly what needs to happen. You need to bond to somebody, and of course that's been happening since we were upright. But the fact is that there is a full school of psychology that deals with folks who get stuck in it and can't get out of it and keep doing it over and over and over the course of more than a year, like normal limerence ought to be, but years and years and years, which becomes debilitating. It can kill you. Yeah. The thing about the onion, I like that image. Uh, but one of the things that happens is I know a lot of people who have come to me in my practice and said, I get it. I've peeled the onion. Right. And yet I'm still doing it. And yet I'm still acting that way. I get that what happened then when I was 6 years old set in motion a set of survival things that aren't working for me today. I get that. And the big question they ask is, now what? What's the next thing to do? Once I've identified that nugget of behavior and where it's from, what's the next step?
are you
And
asking? Oh, that's what
I
I
know that
asked
you and
too.
I both as human beings have taken really affirmative actions to change the way we do things and to insert those things into the automatic kinds of stuff we used to do that got us in trouble.
And I feel like it's taking that risk and, doing something that may not feel normal, but towards what you really want, right? Because when you're not used to making decisions for yourself and based on your worth and your presence in the world, then you don't get to show up as fully as you are. So going outside of that box and, you know, and doing the things that make you feel uncomfortable, you know, my family, we have, I have members of my family that live with mental illness. And nobody in my family wanted to talk about it except for my mom. And and she's the one who really encouraged me to go to National Alliance on Mental Illness and take this free course that they offered for families of loved ones with mental illness. Um, well, then it was like, oh my goodness, these are my people, right? Like there's people out there that want to talk about it. And there were some that were, still had a bit of shame and stuff. But then I continued in that. And then, I ended up teaching the family to family class. And then I facilitated ending the silence and, for high schoolers for suicide prevention. And speaking and like even doing this podcast, it's not always comfortable. I mean, I feel like the podcast is a little bit more comfortable because I get to just sit here and think I'm talking to Bill when the whole, universe has access. But, speaking on stage, I really get a lot of anxiety with that. However, my why and how I feel afterwards, right? Like when I speak to people and then they hear me and they're like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. I wanted to say that for so long. I felt like I was hiding, or, I have this, and this, and, thank you for telling your story. And so that little bit of uncomfortableness gets to inspire people. Now, if you were to, bring my family together with my six aunts and my grandmother and the proper Italian women they are, as outspoken as they are, they wouldn't necessarily want me to talk about mental health. Right. So, and that's how I was raised. However, going outside of that and taking a risk and really following my heart and my passion brings me closer to what I really want. And a lot of people don't, I feel like a lot of people are stuck in that keeping their families happy or doing the right thing or be a good girl or be a good boy, and not truly living to their full potential. So I
But
think one of those things is risks, taking risks, healthy risks.
do something. Yeah, I mean, you're a perfect example. I mean, you just laid out the perfect example, and that is, I went to this class and I got some awareness, and wow, look at that, I figured something out, and that's fine. But that's when a lot of people ended up in my office because then they said, now what? Well, you figured out now what? You figured out what to do next, and in order to own it, and in order to embed it in your brain, wherever that thing gets embedded, you went out and you started talking the talk and walking the walk. That's a cliche from self-help programs, but you walk the walk and you talk the talk. Healthy people talk in healthy ways about things, and healthy people do things like they didn't do before. The hallmark of what you're talking about, the hallmark of family members of folks who have drug and alcohol problems and mental health problems and so forth, the hallmark is the secret. Don't talk about it. Be quiet about it. Maybe it'll go away. If we talk about it, that'll only make it worse or lead to uproar. And yet, you can't blame folks for saying that, because in the past, not talking about it, it passed for a little while. Right? And what if they talk about it or do something about it? Maybe what happens will be worse than what they're doing right now. It takes a lot of courage to make that jump.
Yeah.
And as you pointed out, it's a lot easier if you can see other people who are jumping at the same time and they hold your hand when you jump.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and I feel, you know, there's a cousin of mine. He has a mental illness, and he's a bit of a recluse, and I'm friends with him on Facebook. And my other cousin's like, "Why are you even friends with him? Like, well, he's making these comments on your post, and his comment on my post wasn't the nicest. However, I turned it around, right? And I created more of a space for him to hold, I mean, if I were to say that to him, he's like, you wouldn't hold me, but just a safe place for him where, I mean, he feels some sort of connection, right? And that he's not alone. And um I don't know, to just give him that, I'm not giving of myself where, I don't have boundaries, but I feel like everybody deserves to, like, here's my hand, right? Like, you don't have to do this alone. Oh, and it may not even be that I'm working with him, but perhaps him seeing that I was a little bit open with him, that it may lead him to do something else healthier for his life. And if not, that's okay too. I don't have an expectation on it, but I don't feel like closing out somebody who has a mental illness because he doesn't always act in his right mind and is sometimes just a jerk. He deserves some love too.
Let, let me take a crack at making that a broader principle. In my work, people come to me who have family members who have chronic illness like that. whether it be alcohol or mental illness or whatever. And they find that no matter what they do and how they do it, it doesn't seem to get any better for them. They can't help the other person to change. They feel frustrated and angry and anxious. And what's happening is what they're doing is reacting to the other person's behaviors. And in that way, becoming just as extreme and out of control as the other person's behaviors. And the thing to do, the thing that always seems to work with them, is if you say, I'll tell you what, how would you act if that person weren't mentally ill or weren't chemically dependent? How would a spouse act toward that person? How would a friend or a cousin act towards that person? In a wholesome, loving sort of way, right? So maybe it doesn't feel right to react to their dysfunction by being loving and wholesome towards them. But maybe we can get them to be reactive to us if we're more wholesome and loving and well-grounded. Right? I've always told some of my clients like this, what happens if that person suddenly gets sober or gets healthy or gets the right medication? And now they come back to a family that's all screwed up because it's been trying to accommodate you. Don't they deserve a wholesome, healthy place to come back to? Yeah. So maybe you need to start acting like you do. You act, everybody else says, I'll cut them off. Well, that seems absurd, doesn't it? And you say, no, don't cut them off. They're a cousin. Act like they're a cousin. Well, boy, that's hard for people to do, as you know. It takes courage and it takes energy.
Yeah, it does. And I think it's, even with that, it's, that's even a little risky for me, right? I mean, I feel like now my family, some of them are a little bit more open to talking about mental health, but not really. Because the more years that go on, the more people in our family have mental illness. And so it's like this is clearly in our family. And so it's not gonna go away. Um, but then there's yeah, I mean I don't know how we got to this, but it's
We say that a lot, don't we?
I
How did we
know.
get here?
Okay, so let's bring it back around, right? So those were
Okay,
examples of how things you can do to create a different outcome for yourself.
sure.
So you can't be in limerence forever. I hope that explains a little bit of what people are feeling when they fall in love. And it's so funny with the year to 18 months, just enough time to have a baby. But also, how, and that's our brain, right? That's our brain automatically doing it. And we're not saying, hey, brain, we want to go in limerence. It's just something that it does. We don't have
Right,
control over it.
right. And there's all kinds of forces that trigger that. And there's all kinds of research on that too. It's visual and it's intellectual and it's auditory and it actually sensory in a number of different ways. But it happens. That's what. But love doesn't happen. Real love that endures takes work. Real love takes commitment and it takes
Choice
action.
and
Yes, and
choice.
choices. Mhm.
I feel
That's right.
like you choose in every day. And, you know, even if one day it's 80% and the next day it's 10%, because I feel like there's the ebb and flow, right? But it's still, you choose in every day and it does take work. And I feel like a lot of people go into relationships with expecting the person to change.
Yeah.
And not having realistic expectations. Like if you used to, if like I've seen it with friends of mine, and they go to the bar, they're hanging out, and they meet this guy, and the bar guy's there, a couple times a week, and they're having a great time, and then they get into a partnership, and now all of a sudden he's drinking too much. And and it's not just when it's with her. And it was like, but he was doing that before. That's how you met him. So now why
Mhm.
do you all of a sudden expect him to change? I expect that limerence may not be in motion at that time. Or perhaps it is that they're blind and they don't see it.
And they're delusional and they see another person instead of the one that's sitting there.
There you go.
Yeah. And then in a year and a half, they say, but you're not the guy that I met. You're not the guy I used to know. Well, he never was that guy. What he isn't is the guy you thought he was while you were in Limerence. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's there was one other thing that I thought of when I went to get coffee in between our two sessions, and that was one of the other things about limerence is there's this big thing called an endorphin spill in your brain. And
Mhm.
endorphins uh, are all kinds of things that happen in terms of pleasure and reward and all the rest of that. And it's part of what gets you addicted to drugs. But it's also a thing that drops out when you're having a high adventure or you're excited or you're in limerence. And it's real easy to get addicted to that endorphin spill and to want that from over and over and over again. And you can see why people don't invest in love and a more durable relationship, but keep chasing that and then keep being disappointed. And one of the saddest things that happens in my practice is people coming in and say, I don't know what my problem is. It must be me. Why doesn't love last for me? Well, because you're not chasing love, you're chasing limerence, and it's not supposed to last.
So what is that? Is there something in our brain that determines the level of limerence?
And well, it's different for all people, the degree to which that happens, but it also one of the things I think keeps showing up is that people don't have good role models. That they grow up and they haven't seen two people in their family who love each other and are respectful and are affectionate and are loving and supportive with each other, but who just kind of drift through their days or are actually cruel to each other, or one of them is mentally ill, or one of them is chemically dependent. And what they see growing up is a dysfunctional relationship, and they never learn. They don't have this image in their head of two people who are really cool with each other and really love each other. I mean, self-disclosure, I am blessed. I grew up in a family, huge family, and almost all of them are still married to each other. And I had a lot of different images of that, even though my father was a creep and ran away. So I had some of that to draw, you know. But one of the things that people don't understand is I say, so maybe you need to do love. Maybe you need to stop expecting it to do you, that thing that we call limerence. Oh, I don't know how to do that. Okay. Now we got a place that we can counsel. Now we can coach you.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like too, um, you know, even in a family where the parents are together, that I mean, I guess you don't want, I don't know. I feel like keeping your kids from parents' real life situations and the fact that they go through things, and that sometimes it's hard and sometimes it's not. Like, why are we hiding that from kids? Because that's reality. So what if you pretend that you have no problems, they're gonna be in for a real hard smack in the face when they grow up and they realize everybody's got something.
Mhm.
So I think that's part of it too. And I think that people are quick to get divorced instead of having the conversation. And then like you said before, like if there's something negative about your partner and we consistently focus on the negative, well, I feel like the universe is going to bring us more and more negative about that person. But if you start focusing on the positive, like even if it was, well, at least he takes a shower, right? And being grateful for the things instead of looking at all of the negative, that could help improve relationships as well. Right? Like when you look
There's
at
actually,
Lisa, you don't look at her flaw. I mean, maybe sometimes you see her flaws, but you see her beautiful and her overall, you adore her. Most of the time.
actually, I do. Yeah.
I know you do.
And I don't think that's altogether an accident. I mean, one of the things I experienced growing up is when I would hear my uncles talking about my aunts, they didn't do that kind of talk that I heard other people doing, and that is calling them the battle axe or she who must be obeyed or the old war horse or other pejorative names. I always heard them talking about them as sweet and loving, and they would be funny when they would talk about them. And it was clear that part of what contributed to them staying together so long is these guys willing to do that, to say that stuff out loud and to other people and to themselves instead of the other pejorative kinds of things. And I must tell you that one of the complaints I get sometimes after I do a workshop is that uh, sometimes people say, "Gee, you spend a lot of time talking about your wife," and I do in those workshops. I talk about some of the things that I know that she does that bind us and that have made our relationship work. Uh, and I think that contributes to our relationship lasting the way it has. I know she does that about me.
Yeah.
I get feedback from people saying I'm sick and tired. Oh, I've heard a lot about you and I'm sick and tired of it.
Yeah, so I think and just like all things, it takes some energy, it takes work, it takes, looking
Mm.
outside of your normal conditioned life, that we kind of inherited from previous generations and it doesn't have to keep you stuck because people didn't make the choices that you want to, but you get to make the choices
Right. You can act the way you want to. You can.
and
And
have
some
the
people
thing.
think that they can. Some people feel victimized by the way they're acting and the way they're feeling and the way they're thinking. And our biggest job is helping them to understand you can make a choice. One little one at a time, but you can make a choice.
Yeah.
The problem that a lot of people have when they come into my office is they don't know what the heck those choices are. They have no clue about the next step. And that's where coaches like you and I come into play. And we say, well, here's about 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 12 things that you might try instead.
Yeah,
What's the old definition? If you keep doing what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. And, I mean, I know that when I work with people, they choose in, are you coachable? Are you willing to hear things that may not be comfortable to you? I mean, do you really want to move forward or don't you? Because if you're gonna get offended when I tell you some things, well, then perhaps I'm not the one for you to work with.
Or maybe it's not your time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that it's attainable. I think that people have that inner calling and to listen to that more so, as long as it's something healthy for them, right? Like even with the limerence and realizing that when you're in limerence, that is only for a moment in time. And if you really want to keep it going, there's some work and energy to get into that love space.
To build on that, one of the reasons that people take so long to figure out that the limerence is gone, the 16 months happens, to have the little baby. Now there's the whole thing about changing diapers and cleaning spit up off your suit and loving the little baby and all of that excitement of that process. And then at some point when they're 3 years old or they're 4 years old, around the fifth year, people raise their heads and say, "What the heck?" And then they wonder where the limerence is, and they spend another year or two trying to figure out what happened to the limerence and how can I get it back, and complaining, even if only internally. And guess the magic.
Huh.
All of a sudden, it's the seventh year, and what people have traditionally called the 7 year itch.
Yep.
And that's how it happens, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why people so often get divorced around that seventh year or have an affair around that seventh year. Because they're not looking for love, they're looking for limerence. And I love that old Eagles song, "Looking for love in all the wrong places."
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on that note, we are just about out of time. So stop looking for love in all the wrong places.
Well, since we're closing up, this time, last time I didn't know how to do it. I didn't remember how to do it. But if you have questions, we really would like for you to ask us questions. If you have any concerns, if you have feedback, just want to talk to us, or you want to show us a cartoon or something, that's fine. Contact us at hello@truthbetold.world. That's hello@truthbetold.world. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. See you next time.